All right, and we are live. Welcome everyone to Change Notice, our drone edition. I'm super excited for this one. Joined by not one, but two special guests today. I've got Taylor and Chris here. So we're gonna wait just a few minutes, let everyone trickle in, chat a little bit about drones, and then get into the meat of the teardown. So for those of you coming in now, lay of the land, you please introduce yourself down in the lower right in the chat. Beforehand, make sure you switch the little blue box to everyone. By default, it just sends it to hosts and panelists. And we love getting your messages, but we want everyone else to get them too. So switch that to everyone. Let us know where you're calling in from. And what we want to hear is, what was your first experience with a drone? Could be actually using one, maybe even tearing one down. First experience with a drone. So maybe our team here, Chris, you want to share your first experience?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't really flown too many drones, but I remember back when I was going to China a lot for work. I sort of saw the transition from I think the remote control, the RC, like planes and helicopters, so that you would see the genesis of the drone, and then maybe a couple years later, then it was like drones everywhere. So it was very much like the technology just kind of figured itself out right around that time frame, like 2008 to 2010. It was really interesting to see that transition, because I remember buying one of those helicopters and I crashed it immediately. And I was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't invest in these things for a while. And that turned me off. And now all of a sudden drones are super stable. They're getting this awesome footage. And it's really incredible to see the change in just a few short years. How about you?
Yeah, I remember, I think it might have been around the same time. My first experience with a drone, it was not fancy. It was those small, I think it was $20 for that tiny little drone. They would fly them around the mall. And I remember being drawn in, and I was like, no way is this thing legit for $20. And so I had to buy it. It was about yay big. And sure enough, it flew. It was not stable in any way, no sensors, tiny little remote control, and I would crash it all around the house. The little propellers would fly off. I think there's still some under the couch. And I'm like extremely impressed flying the new ones today. That was maybe 7-8 years ago. Flying the new ones today, how far they've come, all the stabilization. I've been super impressed. Taylor, what about you? What was your first drone experience?
So I grew up with a deep fascination of everything remote controlled. I just loved the idea ever since I was little of being able to control something from far away. So I grew up doing like a lot of different RC kind of hobbies. And my first drone flight was probably same as you, Tobias, one of those like cheap $20 ones that you can just find anywhere now. But yeah, that sort of that turned from RC hobby to drone hobby very quickly after that. And so now I do some pretty regular FPV drone flying, which is first person view, where you put on the goggles and you look like a big nerd, and that's me.
That's that's next level droning in my book, but excited to get your thoughts on the drone that we're going to tear down today.
I'm excited to see it.
All right, welcome for those of you just joining us now. Welcome to Change Notice Special Unsnapped Edition. Please go ahead and introduce yourself down in the lower right. Make sure you're messaging to everyone and not just hosts, and tell us about your first drone experience. We were just sharing ours. So let's go ahead and officially kick this off. So welcome to this week's extra special edition of Change Notice Unsnapped. Extra special because joined here by two guests, Chris as well as Taylor from iFixit. The goal of this weekly video podcast is really to build a community for knowledge sharing, support, and improvement within you guys, within the community. And sometimes is hosted by our CEO, Anna, these special unsnapped teardown editions. I think we're on episode 6 or so. These are hosted by experienced mechanical engineers like Chris and I. So quick reminder, if you need to leave early, please fill out that survey at the end. Super valuable to us. And with that, let's do some intros. So super excited, I think for the first time on this forum, to be joined by Taylor. Taylor, you want to give an intro?
Yeah. My name's Taylor Dixon. I work at iFixit. I've been there for about, I guess, almost 4 years now. I am not a mechanical engineer like Tobias and Chris, but I am a reverse mechanical engineer, you might say. I do a lot of the teardowns at iFixit, and yeah, that's just a lot of fun. So I am happy to be here, really excited to look into this drone.
Welcome. And Chris.
Yeah, my name is Chris. I have a lot of experience from my days at Amazon, working on a lot of Kindle devices, and then was at a health tech startup building some consumer products. Actually, most recently, I joined a self-driving tractor startup. So that's going to be fun to see what comes out of that, and maybe we'll get some larger products here to tear down in the next upcoming change notice teardowns. But yeah, tell us about yourself, Tobias.
All right. Yeah. Mechanical engineering background, did product design back at Apple for about 6 years, worked on a lot of sensors within the Apple Watch and the iPhone. And I've been leading a couple different teams at Instrumental for about 3 years now. And super excited to see what's inside of this drone and maybe learn a little bit from Taylor's experience with drones as well. So quick agenda, we're going to do the live teardown, really focusing on engineering decisions made in the designs. We actually have some x-rays of the device from some of our partners as well. Ask any questions throughout. We want your feedback. We will have a dedicated live Q&A session at the end as well. So let's dive into it. The first question is why drones? Why DJI in particular? That extra valuable survey that you guys are all going to fill out. Actually, the most requested item was a drone. So we're delivering here for everyone just before the holidays, the drone teardown.
Merry Christmas.
And as a Christmas gift to the community is at long last, we have a drone teardown. And what I was actually, when looking at these drones, since I wasn't that familiar, I was shocked that DJI is just dominating the drone market. We actually found out 70% of the consumer drone market is owned by DJI, which is just crazy. This is a Chinese brand. And recently, actually in the news, there's a lot of drama going on. I heard that there's an investor blacklisting where foreign investor, I think it's US in particular, are no longer allowed to invest in DJI because there's some involvement with the Chinese military. So really interesting space. Maybe Taylor, you've got some more experience with drones. What's your opinion of the drone market and kind of where DJI fits in?
The drone market is really fascinating right now because, like you said, DJI has such like a stronghold on it, and it's interesting because, like you said, they are a Chinese company, and really everyone else is either making the top of the line cinema drones, which DJI also makes, or they're making sort of toy drones. There are brands like Autel or Holy Stone or SEMA, and they sort of dabble between toy and sort of the consumer prosumer where DJI is. But yeah, like you said, DJI is just far and away the only sort of reliable prosumer video drone.
Awesome. They've developed something that I've seen copied a lot, but they're still the leader. So best way to understand it is to tear it apart. So let's get into it. Chris, you wanna take us away?
Let me share my screen. Let's see if I can do this. All right. We got our fancy new iFixit teardown kit and a
Hey.
little
Yeah.
screw mat. So thank you, Taylor, for getting that arranged for us. But yeah, this is the DJI Mini 2. So this is the one that actually, I think it says on one of these arms that it's less than 249 grams, because that's the maximum limit where you don't have to register the drone with the FAA. So lowers the barrier to fly, or barrier to entry to flying, and it's super light. Basically, you see it fits in the palm of the hand, which is amazing. What's cool is I think a lot of the DJI drones, like the arms kind of flip out in a couple of different directions. So the two front ones go out that way, and the back ones kind of swing from underneath. So this is the drone in its full, well, see if I can get it up there. It's fully expanded. So this is the second version of their Mini. I think the first one, a couple of differences, and sorry, I've already taken this apart just because the front half was a little bit fiddly, but they've added this light, and they've actually made it a few grams lighter than the first one. So that's pretty exciting to see what they've been able to do between these two versions, and see if we can spot some of the differences. Yeah, I think, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm just going to lift this top cover off because I already took it apart a little bit, just because this was really annoying to get off. And you'll see the plastic is actually very thin. It's this is part of the light weighting, weight reduction, but it's, you know, I think I've already deformed a little bit of the plastic there, and a few of the tabs are bent. So I didn't want to keep taking it on and off a couple of times. Also, because these motors are soldered on, I didn't want to have to unsolder them during this presentation. So there's also this battery. It looks like it's a, what is it? Maybe I can't quite read it. Yeah, 2250 milliamp hour battery at 7.7 volts, so 17 watt hours. But that's that. Let's see if we can get a closer view of the lay of the land here. This looks like the power and motor control board, so that's where the motors were soldered. We got, this is a really interesting mechanism here. I think this is the GPS, maybe all-in-one kind of sensor chip here. And then you can also see the camera. This is the camera module. Oh, I gotta take that part off. It's on this gimbal, which allows you to do those really cool cinematic shots, but it's also on a movable sort of isolated damper system. So that's pretty interesting. A couple other cool things you can note just from the top, just interesting things to note. There's a lot of like black pen marks here around the outside. I don't know, Tobias, do you have thoughts on why that might be there, or Taylor?
Yeah, that one's really interesting. And I think when we take a closer look, you know, originally I thought that might be that little aperture there might be for a sensor. The black ink, I think there's an LED in the front there, and my best guess is that there's a really thin wall of plastic there, and they're worried about light leakage through that plastic. And this looks like sort of a last minute mitigation where they just inked over some of the really thin portions where they were seeing some external light leakage.
I think you're right. There's a black piece of tape here as well, and I think there might even be a little piece of foam. So I think they really had some like last minute struggles with this, and maybe we're trying to just do like throw the kitchen sink at this without adding too much weight, just because that's so important. The other thing you can see are these two copper tape pads that kind of go around this antenna, or this GPS module. So I'm not quite sure what that's for yet, but maybe we can come back to that in a bit. But yeah, that's kind of what you see from here. Maybe we can take a closer look and get a better image than what I can show here on my webcam.
Yeah, I would love to hear. Those two copper tape areas are really interesting. Would love to hear from the audience any theories on what the function of those could be. I know we have some experts from other drone companies that are joining us here, so I'm very curious to hear their feedback on some of our theories for the design decisions here. So what do you guys think that copper tape is for?
Chris, you said that copper tape was around where the IMU is. Okay.
So let's hop into the more detailed images here. For anyone not familiar, this is the instrumental application. Typically, we're taking in a large quantity of images from the production line. Here, we're just using it as an easy navigation tool with the user interface to look at these high resolution images. And for anyone interested, we have all of the previous teardowns that we did as well in a nice catalog here. We can hook you guys up with access to this. Let us know if you're interested. So we popped off the top cover, and Chris, just to confirm, was that top cover, were those just snaps that you had to pop off, or were there screws as well?
There were 4 screws in the corners. So I think the 2 on the left there, and then I think 2, I can't quite remember where the other 2 are, but yeah, there.
2 that are hidden right there.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take a closer look here. This gimbal here that actually it looks like it dampens any vibration for this chip. I think this chip is a combination IMU, XL, GPS. It's pretty impressive that they got that all compacted in just to one area. And the other things that jump out, so it looks like there's a board-to-board connector over here that snakes down with this flex, and what looks like a couple glue dots just on the side, which is interesting. What do you guys, I've got some theories, but what do you guys think that is for?
Yeah, I mean, I think this drone probably undergoes a lot of stress. So these connectors are probably, constantly being torqued around or vibrated. So that must be for better sealing, but and just hold down force. But Taylor, maybe you have some comments on the repairability of such features.
Yeah, a couple thoughts here. Like you said, Chris, these things are going through sort of like the most strenuous environment that you can imagine for electronics. A lot of vibrations, and so glue on the connectors really does help them to stay down. I do a little bit of DIY quad building, and it's sort of just a process of you're constantly losing connectors. And so they actually solder a lot of things when you're building your own quad because you're sure that's not going to come off with vibrations. But in the repairability angle, the glue that DJI uses typically, I'm not sure if this is the case on this one, you can sort of break the seal and still reseal the connector, reseat the connector. But I know that there are other companies who use glue that can easily damage the connector as you lift it up. So that's the main thing that we are looking for in terms of repairability when it comes to like glue on the connectors like this.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is probably for mitigation for any loosening due to vibrations here. It is interesting that they just did the sides. And what's interesting in the middle, this looks like a little conductive foam here, which is kind of peculiar because looking at the other side of where this contacts on the housing, it doesn't appear, so this would be contacting right around here, doesn't appear that there's anything conductive. Typically this would be to ground it to some larger piece of metal. It doesn't appear that there's anything conductive. So it could just be, we noticed some other conductive foams throughout, and it could just be they wanted to standardize to use the same stiffener foam across a whole bunch of different connectors. The other function here is really just to keep that board-to-board connector under compression, which is the standard function for some of these foams. Let's look at the camera quickly. And Taylor, it would be great to get your thoughts here. I believe this gimbal on the camera, the only powered access is actually the tilt. And then the rest of the motion is just a damping mechanism that just prevents the camera from vibrating during flight. Is that typical just to have 1 degree of powered motion, or how do you think they made that decision compared to some of the more advanced drones?
DJI usually makes that decision based on the price point they're going for. And so if this is, I would say, entry level for DJI. And so yeah, the sort of entry level drones usually get a 1-axis powered gimbal. And then as you go up the ranking, you pay more and more money, you get 2 or 3 axes powered, and that sort of gives you more control as you're making your movies. I think they assume that people who buy this drone are mostly just going to be sort of learning how to fly and maybe doing some simple cinematography, nothing too complex. So I'm guessing that's their thinking there.
Yeah, I think that's a good guess. So Robert has a theory on the copper tape here.
Oh yeah.
Either it sounds like either shielding, or actually had a theory about a capacitive touch solution, which is an interesting thought, because you mentioned this is where you would typically grab the drone from the top. It looks to me, it looks like this is not actually connected to anything on the backside.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look complex enough to actually be a full cap touch solution, but that is actually an interesting thought based on like where the user grabs it. All right, maybe one more thing before we move on with the teardown here. To Chris's point earlier, this area is really interesting. So they have this small grate on both sides. It's almost a vent. The ink here, we think that's just for preventing light leakage. But what are these grates for? Like, are they actually vents? Or it almost looks like there was space here for some other component or sensor. What do you guys think the design intent was here?
They're either speed holes to make it go faster. I think that was a Simpsons reference, but I think the more expensive drones, to Taylor's point, also have like those obstacle avoidance sensors. So that might have been something that they were attempting to put in, but maybe just couldn't quite meet the weight requirements. I don't know, Taylor, if you have any more experience with those sensors.
Yeah, so I know all the drones that DJI makes have obstacle avoidance sensors somewhere in them. At least I'm pretty sure. So that could be the case, and maybe even the first DJI Mini had sensors here, and they wanted to sort of reuse the frame, but they moved the sensors somewhere else. Are there LEDs around here? Like, I mean, we're talking about light leakage here.
Yeah, I think in the front that this is the DJI. One of the differences between this and the first Mini, there is a light, I think an indicator light right there in the center.
Oh, okay.
Which is covered. Yeah, they've also inked the top housing and some other things, so they must be getting some reflections or just bouncing of the light that was unintended.
Kyle has a really great idea. He says it could be to help regulate pressure or flex between altitude and warp from, like, because the plastic could warp.
Yeah, that's interesting, just because it's pretty thin plastic, so that might be the case for sure.
All right, keep the theories coming. I like it. Let's keep going and take this to the next teardown step here, Chris.
All right.
I'll switch it back to you. We still need to solve that mystery of the copper tape, though. I think maybe once we figure out what some of those wires are routed on the side, we might be able to solve the mystery, if that is actually shielding.
So I think I got to take 2 screws off here using my new handy dandy driver. This is a quality driver, I gotta say. I thought this might be a plastic one when I saw them online, but this is like a full aluminum housing for this. So
There is
good job, guys.
There is a plastic version that comes with some of our less expensive kits, but yeah, the metal drivers are where it's at.
So, and I can put my screw on this metal mat, or this magnetic mat. This is pretty fun. I think I was doing a prep for this and I lost one of the screws inside, so I'm happy to have that. And this is actually pretty thin plastic in the back here, so I think I gotta get a couple of these plastic. You can see how flexible it is. But let me get this in. There's a snap there. So there's like 6 snaps on the sides, and then I can just wiggle it loose. But it's there you go.
It's like pretty thin plastic there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really flexible. I can bend it like this. That might be like 0.8 to less than a millimeter thick, or maybe even thinner. So it's pretty incredible. They got pretty good cosmetics on it for being so thin. So inside you see this giant, I think it's an aluminum shield. They also have like a little tamper resistant thing here. So I'm just going to remove that. This probably is voiding the warranty.
It's actually illegal for them to void your warranty based on a sticker like that.
Ah, okay.
Oh, interesting.
This is their
Thankfully.
attempt to void the warranty, but
Yeah, so that they can claim that can void your warranty, but they cannot legally
actually void
void your
warranty.
warranty just because you took that sticker off.
Good to know. I feel much more confident taking this apart now.
Go away, go
Um,
ahead.
So it looks like they had 2 screws here that I had taken off previously, and they were holding this like kind of clamped down, and then there's 3 other screws on the side here. So let me get those, and then you got to look underneath. This is slightly different screws. So the shield here makes me think that there's, or this sort of a heat sink almost, makes me think that there might be some kind of heat issue with this drone. But we can get a closer look underneath.
I'll say broadly speaking, heat is an issue with most drones. So yeah, there's just a lot of things happening. Most DIY quads are cooled just by air running over them, but since DJI encloses all of the electronics, they usually do have to sort of like soak everything in this yeah.
That is a lot of thermal paste.
That's a lot of thermal paste on this. I think I got to take off one connector on this side.
Yeah, thinking about the design constraints for the thermals, they're on one hand, they're very constrained by weight and size. So they're really pushing this like beyond just handheld devices like phones and watches. This thing is probably even more constrained by size and particularly weight. And there's just a huge amount of real-time processing going on there. Probably the main chip, they have all the radio communications, real-time video. I think it's 4K video processing.
Yeah.
All of the sensor processing. This is like high demand, and so I'm impressed, and I can totally understand why they had to use so much thermal paste for the thermal management here.
Yeah. So it looks like before I take this board out, I gotta unsnap a couple of antenna cables here.
We found the antenna cables. All right. And
But,
where do those lead to?
You know, we gotta take those. Why don't we take the board out, then we can do a little more investigating. They look like they go down the sides somewhere and possibly out. Maybe we can ask the audience where they think the antennas reside on this on this device. Oh, there's also some more connectors here. Each one of these has the 2 dots of glue.
The magic 2 dots. Yeah, the antennas here are going to be key to maintain that long range. I think they claim a couple mile range with the frequency that they're using. And yeah, I'll be curious to see if anyone in the audience has ideas on what the antenna design looks like here. So far, it looks like there's 2 little coax connectors and antennas that lead somewhere down into the belly of the device. Karsten, let's see. I saw a good question here on Karsten was asking about, it would be nice to have screw covers on the press connectors. Are you referring to, Karsten, the board-to-board connectors instead of using the little glue dots? have some type of removable cowling to actually hold it down. That would be much easier from a repairability standpoint.
That is pretty common in other devices too. I think even I've seen that in DJI drones, but I'm sure that glue is less expensive than a cowling and 2 extra screws.
Yeah, I think cost as well as space is at a premium here.
And weight.
Both, yeah, Z height actually would probably be about the same, more of an XY space on the PCB to find screws. And yeah, weight is another good one.
Yeah, so I'll just show this, and I think to get a better look, we have the images in the instrumental that we can look at later. But this is I guess this is the side of the board that we're seeing from here, and this would be the underside. So there's a lot of shield cans. This was the micro SD slot and the USB-C connector. And I'll just pop off one of these shields, and then I think it might be better to go to the images that we had, just because I
try to not get that thermal paste everywhere.
I suspect there's going to be thermal paste, a lot of thermal paste.
Are those shields soldered down to the frame?
They're not. Each one actually has, yep, there's some more thermal paste. So like every IC looks like there'll be some thermal paste. So there's a frame and then there's a lid. So I guess in case they need to replace some chips or get access, I think it's a good method for this. And I guess the extra weight on the outside is probably justified by the number of the high cost of this component, where I need to replace a BGA every once in a while. But I'll put that aside, and maybe we can switch over to you, Tobias.
Yeah, let's go back into the app. Let me pull it up here. And just as a reminder here, this is the instrumental web platform that we're using, and it's actually got a lot of uses beyond just viewing these images here. If you're interested in learning more, we actually have some great use cases. Brands like Bose and Axon and Lenovo are using this to find and fix these type of issues. We'll highlight some of the issues here, but it's all the stuff that we're talking about: connectors staying in place, these glue dots actually being in the right spot, the thermal paste being applied where it should be. These are all highly variable processes that they've worked very hard to fine tune, and that's exactly what Instrumental's platform is designed for. So if you've got exciting projects coming up, please reach out. We'd love to hear about them. And looking at the backside here, so this is where we were before, and now we flipped it over to where Chris took off the PCB. So before we take it off, just lay of the land here, Chris, we have this other, what looks like a sensor module here. I don't believe these are cameras. Do you know what we have here?
Yeah, I mean, I think these actually I didn't really show the bottom, but they come through the housing. So I think they're on the bottom of the device. I think it's like a proximity landing sensor. So it might be just a simple IR emitter transmission emitter receiver pair, just to get gauge of distance. There you go.
Oh, yeah. So once you take off the small black covers, I don't think they're actually lenses. I think it's just an IR transparent.
Yeah.
It looks like originally I thought it was two separate sensors, like two distinct sensors, but looking at it closer, this one looks like an LED. Yeah. And this one a photodiode that's receiving the signal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
I was looking, we were looking at one of the older ones, and it seemed like maybe Taylor, you guys had taken apart one that had like an ultrasonic sensor, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, do you remember if that was on the bottom? I can't remember. Yeah, so all the DJI drones have sort of these obstacle avoidance sensors, but again, they sort of vary based on the spec and the model that you purchase. So the higher end models use more effective sensors, and this one again, like I'm sure they are not assuming people are going to be doing strenuous activities with this, so they are just picturing people landing very slowly in a straight line downward. So
Yeah,
all they needed was this.
that makes sense.
A few other interesting things here. So looking at, let's actually hop to the underneath the shield view. So one thing that I noticed was on this side here. So we have all these board-to-board connectors, again with the glue dots and the conductive foam on the back. And this time the conductive foam looks like it actually has a purpose. So if we look at where here, these 3 board-to-board connectors with conductive foam on the stiffeners, if we look at where that actually makes contact with the heat sink on the inside, so the thermal paste here in the middle, but they have these exposed metal regions right here, as well as on the corners. And typically this is so you actually have a conductive path to ground this giant piece of metal here. Again, this is done for antenna performance. You want this thing to be grounded. And it looks, Chris, I don't know if you have thoughts on how they actually exposed this, if it was actually masked off during the anodization process.
I mean, I think masking is definitely one option, but if you go back and zoom in a little bit, I think you can kind of see a diagonal regular pattern, which indicates to me this was laser etched.
Yep.
So this, the resolution on your cameras at Instrumental are incredible. So you can dive in and see all these little details, which is really cool. And you can see, it's starting to oxidize a little bit on the outside edges as it's coming in. So, they probably have to do that pretty close to when they apply this, just so it doesn't oxidize over and you're not actually conducting anything.
Looking at all this thermal paste here, this actually reminds me of one of the previous teardowns we did, which was also extremely constrained by thermals. Hopping over to the Nest doorbell, I remember similar. This is the battery edition that was very, very concerned about thermals. And I remember, let's see if I can find it. The entire PCB here was almost, they had thermal paste on the ICs, but then they had this thermally conductive adhesive that connected. There was just a giant shield here with, again, a heat spreader on top. So again, big focus on thermals in this device as well.
Yeah, Taylor, what do you think about the two approaches from a repairability standpoint?
Well, I mean, first I was thinking, why does a doorbell need so much thermal design? But then I remembered it's a video camera that's constantly running, so that makes sense.
The other thing is that it's outside on your front
Oh
porch,
yeah, and it gets hit
so
by the
that
sun.
one was really interesting because, like, if you got I think I had a former colleague that was working on that and was like, wow, that's big thermal load all the time the sun is hitting it. So
yeah, but in terms of repairability, that thermally conductive adhesive is a nightmare. I'm sure that it's really effective, but like you could even see in those pictures, thanks to that high resolution camera, it's such a pain to deal with, to work around. And if you want to remove it, especially if they just sort of plaster it onto the PCB there, just sort of, you got to forget about it. You're going to ruin the PCB.
What do you think are some, like, is then thermal paste is a better option, even though it still requires someone to buy that and know how to apply
Yeah,
it?
I think so. Thermal pads are not as efficient as paste all the time, but they are nice because it's less stressful to replace. So you don't need to be quite as specialized or precise. The manufacturers can cut the thermal pad to fit exactly where they want it to go. But again, it's a fight for efficiency and cost. So personally, I'm pretty happy with thermal paste when it comes to repairability. Just it's reusable at least, and that's the main point.
Okay.
Not reusable, but replaceable.
I mean,
Easily
replaceable.
replaceable.
Yeah, easily, and you can easily get that, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's a secret material.
A few interesting things here. highlight.
Yeah.
And then I do want to hear from the audience. There's a lot of stuff that we could go investigate here. I want to hear from you guys. Do you want to hear more about the antennas, where we think those go, maybe the shielding, or we could go look into the camera gimbal system as well as the next step? Post your comments in the chat. We want to hear what you're interested in. While we're waiting there, these coax connectors are very finicky. We've seen with a lot of our customers that getting those consistently pressed in is very difficult. It's a manual process and very prone to human error. We've had a lot of success stories helping drive process improvements here, but this one I actually just noticed here on the other side of this heat shield. I think these are it looks like two little foam spacers. And if I line it up here, it looks like, if you flip this over, it looks like those two foam spacers are landing right on top of those connectors. And then after that heat shield is screwed down, it's acting as compression to keep those in place. And one slightly concerning, this foam looks like it wasn't quite placed on in an ideal spot. Again, a great example of a manual process that is prone to error and variability, and there's probably not a consistent check. I know foam placement it's one of those minor things, but it's, an improper foam placement or a missing foam is not going to immediately fail in your factory test. It's going to cause a reliability failure in the field after the drone has been vibrating for 50 hours and then that antenna cable comes unsnapped. So it's these type of things that our system helps to catch early so that you don't have to deal with it later on.
Tobias, did you say that they have to manually connect those coax cables during assembly?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Those are all manually plugged in. Pretty much all the connectors here, the board-to-board connectors, that's done by hand. These coax antenna cables, that's done by hand. It's a very, very manual process.
They have special delicate tools to help you position it properly, but even with that, it's you have to, the operators wherever these are made, they have to get very proficient at that. And if you damage that one connector, the whole board, you have to take it apart, take it out of this thing and do that. And that's probably one of the last steps, is to put these connectors on, because I think we're getting some requests to see where the cables go, and to see how it does it through the rotating folding arms. So we can go back to the main device and take a look at that in a bit.
Yeah.
And then we got a request also for the camera, so we can start with the arms and then go to the camera.
Antennas and cameras. All right. One interesting thing before we go to antennas?
Yeah.
It looks like there used to be a connector here, and now there's not. This looks like the pattern for a board to board, maybe a 24 pin similar to this one, and it's just not there anymore. What do you guys think is going on here? Any thoughts from the audience too? This is always kind of an interesting. You see an artifact of a design decision in the past. What do you think, Chris?
I got two thoughts. The first is they didn't have room for the glue dot, so they just pulled the connector off. The second,
Oh, the glue dots, yeah.
the second is that maybe they were trying to put those obstacle sensors or something else in here, and they just didn't have time, or they couldn't route it properly, or keep the weight down, so they just removed that feature. So
yeah, we've got some interesting theories here from the audience. A few of you guys, Karsten and Kyle, you're sending messages just to the hosts. We love your messages, but we'd love you to share them with everyone else too. So if you want to change it to everyone, theories are diagnostic port during production, no room for the flex cable, or maybe a feature was cut at the last minute to hit a certain price point. All interesting theories. Diagnostic port, I doubt that this would be a diagnostic port. They would probably have either an actual connector for a diagnostic port, or they have test points. If it's like a design intent, they'll have little test points like this or like this. Not enough space. Yeah, it looks almost like either a feature was removed, maybe there was a different SKU where they were intending to have a higher cost with some added sensors, and they wanted to maintain the same layout with the board. That would be my best hypothesis, as they wanted to maintain parity between two different SKUs, and then somehow this feature fell off.
Another
Yeah,
option is
go ahead, Ben.
it could be left over from the first mini, sort of just they were trying to reuse PCBs or cram the same components into a different design.
Yeah, I think that's a great theory.
It is a good theory. It reminds me of the Sonos teardown we did, where we had the mic. There were like 4 or 6, I think, spots in the mic array, and then your version of the Sonos was actually a little older, and then mine, it was gone. So I think yeah, the one on the bottom there is just it's there, but in the one that I got, which is like a forward spin, they had removed it. So
yeah, similar
be...
story where you can kind of see the design history, which is interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's look for antennas. We've got,
all right, let's do that.
We've got some good hypotheses here in the comments. Kartik, I think, might be on to something interesting here.
All right, so we got these 2 antenna cables here, the gray ones, and I think just the cable bundles in general are pretty interesting. But if you see, the cables actually go, there's these little channels that go from the front side or the back side here, or the bottom side of the drone, to the top side. And then they kind of join up with these, this looks like the motor cables, and this is a kind of cable bundling material here. And so both sides of that. What's really cool is you can actually see on the inside of the very farthest part of the arm that you got a little bit of that cable there, and there's a little tab that you can pry out. So why don't we go ahead and open that, and we can see if there's, if what we suspect is true, that there is an actual antenna on the inside of this.
So are those antenna cables only running to the front feet, those 2, the front feet?
Yeah, so you can see them. It's one here on this side and one here on that side. And
Cool.
then the back ones don't have those arms. So it just kind of, it's designed, I guess, sit a little bit at a skewed angle like this. So let's see if we can get in there.
Yeah, I think Omar and Kartik guessed it here, saying in the front arms.
Well, Kartik, I remember, used to work at a drone company, so maybe he had some special knowledge.
Kartik, do you know why they choose the front arms by chance? I'm curious about that. When we do DIY drones, we typically put all the receivers and the transmitters towards the back. But the feet make sense, and only having feet on the back legs would be a little weird. So maybe it has something to do with that.
Yeah, my original guess, before I had realized that those feet were actually the antennas, I thought the design constraint was around the folding mechanism of the arms in. And I thought, because of the design constraints there, those front arms ended up at a higher plane. And so the feet was just a necessity to make it balanced, to make it planar. But knowing that the antennas are there, it could be a balance of both. There could be some functional reason that the front was better. And then it also worked out that with the arm folding, they needed a little extra foot there.
All right, this is taking a little bit longer, but I think I can get it.
May have
And
also
the other
been
thing is it's
easier.
really-
Oh,
Go ahead.
we're all
I was
going.
going to say it's also the farthest point away. So if you wanted to maintain that distance, sorry, I'm just going to manhandle this.
And coming back to our original mystery of the copper tape there. So where Chris showed that antenna cable, it starts from the coax on the backside, and then it snakes through the body out to the antennas. You can see right there. And I believe, yeah, you see that little gray cable? That is the only section where that antenna is exposed. And so it looks like it is likely related. My guess is it has to be related to that antenna routing. Either a little bit of external shielding. It's close to the exterior there, and they don't want any type of external interference from other signals. Or only other theory would be some type of coexistence between that antenna and that IMU, the GPS module right next to it. I'm not sure exactly how the copper tape would enable that, but everyone knows antennas are black magic, and so it's really hard to actually predict.
Yeah, I think this is a really cool thing, and I like, even though these arms, they have this giant motion, there's actually not that much translation of the cables themselves, which I think helps protect them. So I think kudos to DJI and a lot of the other drone manufacturers that do this to try and minimize the amount of movement of this. I know it's also similar in like laptops when you get that arm, because you don't want, you're going to unfold this many times if you're flying it every day. And it's just kind of fun to flip them open. So they've probably got to be really concerned with that.
Kirsten points out that might also be why they routed the antenna cables through the front arms, because those ones fold and the other ones do like a 180.
Like this rotation, this rotation.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, good point.
That would be a little bit trickier.
Cool.
One question for you, Chris.
Yeah.
Are we going to open up the arms at all, or take off an arm?
We can take off. I tried to take off one of these, the front arms. It's actually a little tough, but we can take off one of the back ones.
Okay, we don't have to do that right now. That's one of the things that I think about for repairability, though, because you can break an arm pretty easily on a drone, and that's the one bummer about soldering the motor wires is you have to desolder the motor wires, sort of like reroute the whole thing. So that's a pain. Yeah,
it looks like I think we can actually take one of these off right now. The back ones are much easier to take off because there's these two screws here, and then I think we can get to the camera after this.
And keep those in the audience here, keep the questions coming in. Great questions so far. Love the discussion on the antennas here. I do think antennas are often a key component in these devices, especially in drones here.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I saw another theory here from, where was it, that might actually be the least noisy spot for the antennas because it's farthest away from the main body where all the other processing is going on. I think that's probably part of the design intent there as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it looks like you got like a pretty beefy mechanism here that sort of swings the arm around, and then you got this plastic, pretty hollow piece. You can see they added a second one here just so they could probably route the cables easier and install the motors.
Oh yeah.
And so then this just kind of snaps on or slides on, and then they screw it in place. The front ones have this arm mechanism here because I guess it goes like this. And I tried this the other day. I couldn't get this little metal piece out, but I think that's a retaining clip, which would allow you to rotate out the pivot for the hinge point there. But that one probably is a little more tricky because of the antenna cable in there.
Yeah, Taryn had a good point that may actually be by design, that one is more difficult to replace because the antenna is in there, and it would be a much more complex process and probably higher risk of the repaired device not functioning quite up to standards.
Yeah. So if you're gonna break your drone, make sure to break the back arm.
Yeah, break the back legs because that's easy.
Great advice. If you take away anything from this session, break the
Fly
back legs.
backwards. Always fly backwards.
All right, we've got just under 10 minutes left here, so keep the questions coming. We'll actually take this time, if anyone wants to come up on stage to have a little live discussion, maybe give us some recommendations on what we want to tear apart in the final minutes here. There's a raise your hand button down at the bottom. You can either do that, there's a Q&A, or just keep the comments coming. And Chris, you want to do the camera in the last few minutes?
Why don't we do the camera? I think there's a couple of connectors here, and I think, okay, so this looks like I can get that. There's this cable here, which is kind of going around to the gimbal, and then there's this flex cable here, which I don't know what that one is. There might be some camera, because this is like has to do the camera and the gimbal.
Yeah.
So these two mechanisms these two connectors are probably connected with that. So why don't I go ahead and do this tiny one here. Oh wow, okay. I'm glad I had this magnetic mat to put these different screws back.
It's pretty nice. I didn't even know I needed it until I tried it out, and now I can't go back.
Same here.
Okay.
It really is most useful for putting the thing back together. It's easy to take the screws out. It's not easy to remember where they go back in.
Yeah. When I do these teardowns, I usually take photos along the way, so I remember what it looks like. But
that's a good
there have
idea.
definitely been times when I missed a photo and was like, "Oh crap, where did that come from?" All right. I think I can take this out now.
Yeah. So how is that gimbal actually attached to the housing?
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. There's 4 points of contact, but they're all on these very soft damper arms that they're just kind of in this rubbery material here, and they're just held in place with a little stopper on the other side. It's just a kind of flexible, very light durometer rubber, so I think you can just kind of pop that out, and then there's two on the bottom side here as well, so one here and one here, but that just keeps this kind of free floating and isolated from the rest of the drone. And then I guess the powered part of the gimbal probably is what figures out how to keep it steady and stable relative to where its initial position was. So
yeah, let's go ahead and pop it out. Oh, I actually wanted to show as well a quick comparison.
Oh yeah, why don't you
popping that out?
Do that while I take this out?
Yeah, let's compare this. We actually have an X-ray of the DJI Mavic, the larger version. Similar overall design, actually, if you look at the overall shape. So this is the front here, the camera gimbal, and what's interesting is going back to those 2 ports that we had on our device that are suspiciously empty. In this version, it looks like there are actually 2 sensors.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Pointing forward with what looks like a flex cable. And I believe this plays into the collision detection system that they actually have on these higher end modules. And otherwise, yeah, pretty cool. You can see the cables running through the arms similarly here as well. This is provided by our friends over at Creative Electron. Got some pretty sweet looking X-ray. Looks like that. Is that the? It almost looks like the memory chip, like a little SD card right there.
Yeah.
Yep. And looks like they've always soldered the wires. The wires kind of come through. Wonder if that's just a common thing on these drones.
You mean the motor wires?
Yeah, the motor wires.
Yeah, it is common. You can just get better efficiency through a soldered connection usually. So that's even in the DIY drone space where you're constantly redoing connections, it's soldered just for the extra power that you can get.
Right. Let's switch back, and in the last 5 minutes here, we're going to switch it over to just full Q&A. So we'll wrap up the normally recorded session for those of you watching this afterwards, and then we'll switch it over to any live Q&A. Anyone wants to come up and share stories from their drone experiences or ask us any questions, now's the time to do it.
Get this thing out of here.
What did you find on the camera there, Chris?
So yeah, this is the module. Looks like there's, I don't know if this is like this must be like a ball bearing or something that's just allowing this to rotate freely.
Is that the powered axis?
That's not, I think the powered axis is the vertical one, right?
Yeah,
the vertical tilt is the only powered axis.
Yeah.
This one. So looks like it can also maybe freely rotate here to keep it. It's very smooth action. That's very impressive. Yeah, I don't know how to pop that out any further.
Yeah, I had mine here, and it's pretty well contained. My guess would be that this entire module gets assembled separately, maybe even at a sub supplier as this whole camera module is assembled, because it's very self-contained, kind of standalone design.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. They also do have some kind of processing chip here. There's a small IC on the underside, so that must just go in there. And then I think this might be a press fit, just like for the ball bearing, just to get it so it doesn't rattle around a lot. But they have to do that one, and then there's one here, so there's another 2 screws on the back as well. So that's a pretty cool mechanism. And then these are this rubber was actually super stretchy, so on this gimbal, the isolator damper arms, so that's pretty neat. And this actually material, the plastic for this is actually quite stiff. So it looks like a glass filled nylon or something like that, maybe even a carbon fiber filled nylon. So it's a very rigid body on the inside for how thin it is. Yeah.
Maybe in the next edition we'll actually go inside some of the modules. I think it's always a significantly more amount of work to delicately take apart some of these camera modules. We might need an even higher magnification camera to actually see what's going on inside. All right, well, we're just coming up on time here. Maybe to wrap up, what are your thoughts? Maybe Taylor, drone thoughts, DJI Mini. How does this stack up? Would you buy it for that special person for Christmas, or should we DIY it?
I mean, I'm partial to DIY because that's just who I am and how I grew up. And you get to know your quad a little better when you build it yourself. You get to know how it works. But this seems to be a very competently assembled quad from DJI, and I would expect no less from them. My biggest concern obviously is repair. It's so easy to break an arm on your drone, and DJI does have like a repair program, I think, that you can go through, but yeah, I don't know. I would probably recommend it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your drone knowledge, Taylor. Thank you everyone for joining us for this exciting drone teardown. A few reminders. If you want access to all of these high resolution teardown images, shoot an email over to communications@Instrumental, and we can give you access to the Instrumental app. You can play around. You can see all the historical teardowns that we've done as well. A lot of cool stuff. Also, over the holidays here, I know everyone's rushing to get to the holidays. we're interested in what we should tear down next. So keep that in mind as you're getting new gadgets, either things that break on you. We'd love to tear those apart next, see what's going on, or things that you're really impressed by. We'll line those up for early next year. Please fill out that survey at the end, because that's really where we get all of our feedback and helps guide our next discussions. So thank you for joining. Thank you, Taylor, joining us from iFixit. Thank you,
Happy
Chris.
to be here.
Have a good holiday, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Manufacturing is changing, and keeping programs agile and on schedule is harder than ever. Leading engineering teams rely on Instrumental to find issues earlier, fix them faster, and make sure they don't come back. Experience the first manufacturing optimization platform designed to enable continuous improvement of your process, from development through production, by unifying your data so your teams can make decisions faster. Instrumental makes finding correlations in product data easy, so your engineers can spend less time wrangling data across email, spreadsheets, and internal systems, and more time solving problems. It's simple. We put the right data in front of the right people in real time. Instrumental aggregates images of every unit at key assembly stages, parametric test data, and measurements in real time in a secure, managed cloud. When installed across factories in a supply chain, brands and suppliers are able to work together to solve their most complex issues. From your first build, Instrumental's Discover AI proactively identifies new issues by scanning your products for anomalies and automatically delivering a daily queue of issues. Engineers can jumpstart failure analysis with defects in context. Engineers leverage a rich, remote dataset to quickly identify correlations and potential root causes, and can push live tests to validate solutions immediately. They use Instrumental to eliminate issues at the source and make sure they don't come back. With complete build and issue analytics for the entire team, program leads can kickstart daily stand-ups, streamline executive reporting, and communicate seamlessly with global teams. Instrumental has helped leading engineering and operations teams move faster, improve yield, and build better products from proto through production. Better products start with better data. Better products start with Instrumental. Schedule a demo today.